Hello there and welcome to Il Salotto Sessions. I am Sara Seravalli, an Italian event organizer with a profound enthusiasm for design and architecture, bringing over 15 years of experience from my work across showrooms in Milan, Paris, and London. Fueled by a passion for connecting people in the design world, I founded Design Pop-Up in 2014, a specification-focused event, and that has since traveled throughout the UK and Ireland. Today, I'm expanding my vision with Il Salotto, a vibrant space, both virtual and physical, dedicated to inspiring meaningful conversations and fostering connections within the design community. I hope you'll enjoy my chats. Hello and welcome to this new episode of Il Salotto Sessions. I'm here today with Sheena Raeburn, director and founder of Raeburn Farquahr Bowen. Good afternoon, Sheena.
Good afternoon.
Disclaimer for our listeners and viewers. This podcast we tried to record already, but this one here, myself, forgot to click on record. So this is our second attempt. Luckily for me, Sheena's an incredibly kind lady and she didn't punish me too hard. Sorry about that again, Sheena.
Good practice.
Good practice. Right. So today we want to talk about the outdoor. Obviously, Sheena is a very talented landscape architect and you've got a passion for healing environments, which I love that. And the reason why I've invited you here today is because you one of your posts on LinkedIn that you published lately was about the landscape environment that you created for the Southside Housing Association, and there has been a pre and post landscape improvement survey with the residents, and the results were amazing.
Yes, they were. So I suppose just to give some context, the location is in Cardonald in Glasgow, and it's two tower blocks of flats that are 18 stories high. So it did have an existing landscape around it, albeit there wasn't much happening there. It was car parking and grass mainly. And it was sort of hemmed in by the railway on one side and the motorway on the other side. So it was quite a challenging site. And the client at Southside were really keen to provide their residents with something better. You know, the nearest play park, I think, was a couple of miles away. There was a lot of older residents who'd lived in flats all their lives and really enjoyed living there, but didn't feel that there was much there for them in the outdoors. So we were commissioned to prepare some improvements, and that was a sort of joint partnership with Glasgow City Council, who at the same time were looking to improve the drainage and flooding in the area. So SWECO were brought on board to look at how we might be able to bring some of the rainwater from the car parks and the roofs and the roads and so on to bring it through the landscape to slow down the flow, to clean the water, and then to release it slowly into the sewage system in the city to help improve that.
Kill two pigeons with one stone, a bit of a practical side of things as well as improving the outlook.
Absolutely. So, and the other aspect really was to try and have space outdoors for different groups to do different things. So what we were able to do was, I suppose that the client's now calling it a new community park, which it just wasn't thought of as that before. And we've got a sort of dedicated toddler play space that's sort of fully enclosed and it's got seating for parents. And we've also got another area that was really flat ground next to the railway line. And because we were excavating soil to create these drainage features, if you like, the basins and the channels, we didn't want to take any soil off site. So we thought, well, actually, this is a great opportunity to create humps and hills and a bit of, sort of topography in the space so that for older children, they could have more challenging play, things to climb on, climb over. And that's sort of been really successful with that group. And then the other thing that we were keen to do was just to kind of encourage better kind of social connections. So on the ground floor of one of the tower blocks, there was a room that was a kind of social room for some of the older residents. So we sort of brought that to the outdoors as well, and they now have a really pleasant garden area to sit in. It's beautifully planted. There's some space for some food growing on a little raised bed. And, you know, I think what we were trying to achieve has really kind of borne fruit in terms of the results from the survey of residents. And I think, you know, they really kind of value what's been provided there. So the feelings of safety, the health benefits, the social connection. I mean, for example, those surveyed were now speaking, 38% were now speaking daily to someone other than someone they live with, and previously that was only 15%. You know, the feeling of certain aspects of the neighbourhood where people have expressed satisfaction about the play facilities at 97%, which is amazing, bike storage facilities at 94%, and residents' feeling of safety at 91%. So I think these are all it's a sort of big validation for what we're trying to do, and that it's working, that it's making a more resilient community space that provides that space for residents, but also is addressing some of the climate resilience issues, and just even people being outdoors more. So now 30% of residents say they go outdoors for fresh air 4 to 7 times a week, compared with only 10% previously. So that's a huge increase, and that's really what we were trying to achieve in the design. So it's really nice to see that being backed up by that evidence.
Yeah, so when we had the event in Edinburgh last October, where obviously we talked about architecture for well-being, and this is a great example of how architecture, in this case landscape architecture, can support the well-being of its end user. One of the presentations we had was with Peter Kerr of Atelier 10, and it was all about light. And I remember asking Peter, after we had such a horrendous summer like this year we had, how am I going to survive a very long winter? And he said, Sarah, you need to get out lunchtime when there is the maximum level of light. Get out for a walk, 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll see you through the winter. So the fact that you actually provided for these residents a nice way, you're dragging them outside, that's going to have a huge influence on their well-being, not just mental, but physical as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the thing about these flats, I mean, they have amazing views, especially at the higher levels, but there's no outdoor space whatsoever as part of the building. There's no balconies, you know, that people can't, you physically have to go out of the building to access it. And, you know, when I've been out there on site visiting, it's been really nice to see, you know, all types of people using the space, you know, a mum with young children, a woman with a kind of a Zimmer frame, obviously sort of using the path, the looped path, sort of as part of rehabilitation, just to get outside. And yeah, absolutely, before we recorded this today, I made sure I got outside for a quick walk. And I think it can just really sort of connecting with nature as well. Of course, it's not just about being outside, it's connecting with nature, and the fact that there's so much more trees and planting and different types of species, and species that people can plant food and herbs in. You know, there's that sort of connectivity to the landscape, which is really important in such an urban area as well. It's really easy to lose that connection with nature, and you know, it's quite a hostile environment with the motorway and the railway beside, you know, where these residents live. And you know, they're going to see the seasons change. They're going to see the leaves fall off the trees. They're going to see the spring bulbs coming in a couple of months, and just kind of being able to connect with the seasonality and how nature's that cyclical thing. And I think that's something that innately, you know, we human beings are part of nature, aren't we? We're part of the natural world as much as anything else. So it's just the more we can connect with that, even in urban areas, I think there's value there, and there's something they can
Absolutely, there is huge value in allowing these people to be connected with nature, but also the social interaction. We all went just barely survived lockdown when it was so hard. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm lucky enough. I've got a young daughter and a husband, and one of my friends came over from London to stay with us because she lived in a tiny little bed seat in London. So we have a big space here, so she can stay with us. But if you are a elderly person or a single person or whether you live on your own, how can you? Social interactions are so important for not just for our mental health, but also to keep the brain going, right?
yeah,
Think about
absolutely.
the elderly and the dementia patients. You need to get the brain stimulated.
Yeah, and especially with older people, like you say, that loneliness is one of the biggest kind of ills, if you like, in terms of our society, and families are not the way they might have been traditionally, where multiple generations living together. That's just not the case anymore. But we are social beings, even although to a greater or lesser extent. But we are social beings, and I think those little connections, and even if it's you're just seeing someone for a few minutes of a day, it can lift the day for someone if they're living on their own. And if we've provided a space, which now those residents are seeing it as a community park, whereas before it was just a car park, and it wasn't much more than that. And I think having it on literally on their doorstep as well, so they don't have to have a car to go somewhere, they don't have to get on a train or get on a bus to go to nature, if you like.
Yeah.
It's just there for them now. So I think that in itself is something that they can enjoy and relish. And of course, this is just the start, really. This is the beginning of the landscape. We always talk about designing in the fourth dimension as well, because you need time. The trees are living things, they'll take time to mature and grow. And over the next 5, 10, 20 years, that's when that landscape will really be at its prime. Unlike, a building is pristine on day one and then it sort of goes downhill from there in terms of its perfectness. But in landscape, we work on the other end of the spectrum, and the beginning of the landscape is just day one. And the older, more mature and more established it gets, the better it gets. So the benefits should increase over the years as maybe these young families grow up in that space, and then they have
Yeah.
children of their own, and their the grandchildren and so on. So it's a long term game, I suppose, landscape, and time is an essential factor in it.
I was recently talking to Ian Imrie at Collective Architecture about the beautiful Paisley Library that they've designed, and Stephen, the librarian, was also in the chat, and he was laughing how when because the Paisley Library, the way they designed it, every level is like 4 floors, and every floor is targeting a different type of user, if you like. So they left the top floor for the teenagers, and somebody said to Stephen, "Are you not worried they're going to be disrespectful or leave the place untidy or ruin and blah blah blah?" So same question for you. When you were designing the area for the teenagers, older kids in this beautiful landscape you created, did you expect that they ended up actually, because you were giving them something so beautiful, that they're actually making the most of it without being disrespectful?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that we talk about designing for equality and providing access for everyone, but that tone sometimes changes a bit when it comes to making space for teenagers. And I'm a mum of 2 teenage sons, and I think having somewhere you can go that you feel safe is really important. Teenagers don't have the money to go to restaurants and cinemas and all these kind of nice things, nice places to go and do things. And I think, sort of welcoming all ages into these spaces, and there's space for everybody in this at Queensland and Southside. There's space for people just to hang out and chat. And I remember during the sort of public consultation element asking the residents, and some of them had concerns about, if you put in more benches, we're going to attract teenagers to do antisocial stuff, And actually, what's happened is those benches attract, the pensioners and the teenagers and the
Who are doing the antisocial behavior.
yeah, they can be a handful as well. But I think a lot of the problem is not having something to do and then
Yeah.
nowhere to go, and you're kind of thrown from pillar to post, and then what are you going to do? You're going to find other ways to entertain yourself. Whereas I think it's been interesting at Southside. There's not one piece of graffiti. There's not one tree that's been damaged. There's things for the kids to do at all ages, and grown-ups as well. I've seen some of the adults in the swings and kids on the little pump track, and that really came from the community consultation event, because we hadn't thought about including a little bike track. And Bike for Good were there with their little bike that you ride and squeeze juice and all that kind of stuff, and they had bikes and little sort of mobile ramps and things the kids could play on, and they absolutely loved it. And I thought, we've really got to integrate something like that here, because I think they obviously were drawn to that. And yeah, it's not a proper big pump track, but it's enough of a little loop of challenges and lumps and bumps to go around, either with a scooter or a little bike or a trike or whatever, that is safely away from the road and the cars moving around. It's just a space for them to play and be playful. Teenagers don't stop being playful because they're teenagers. It's just a different way of expressing themselves. And I think a key thing is feeling safe. And I think with, the fact that there's more things to do on the site and there's more people spending time outside, that becomes kind of self-policing in a way, and that surveillance, that kind of informal surveillance, that there's people around, and it really doesn't seem to have had any issues on that front.
Well, also because you are giving them value, right? You're saying to them, yes, I'm listening to what is important for you, and therefore they are more grateful and respectful in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting just how a change in an environment can change behaviour, and it's just trying to encourage that positive, side of things rather than destructive side of things.
Yeah. So leaving work for a bit and focusing on passions. The first time I met you was last year, because you kindly donated a beautiful painting for the Architecture Meets Art fundraising event that we organized last year. So what happened before? Was it obviously it was a acrylic on gesso board calling The Afternoon Glow, and it was really beautiful. So is that you're going to be your future career? Is it going to be your past career, or is it just going to stay as a hobby, as a passion to help you distress, unwind, and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I feel like I've come full circle, because landscape was a sort of change of career for me in my late 20s. My first degree was in textile design, and but I also had a real passion for painting, and I did exhibit and sell work quite a lot in my 20s. But when I retrained as a landscape architect, I kind of felt, I have to catch up and focus and just put everything into landscape. And then with taking over the business and having young children and so on, it was quite a busy time. I just never had like space in my head or time for it. But just in the last year or so, since my oldest son's flown the nest and gone to Glasgow, I just felt like I had some time again, and I've sort of restarted painting, and actually, just practically every weekend for the last year I've been painting. So it's been nice to kind of reintroduce myself to that side of me, and it's just a real it's a real contrast from the sort of day job, I feel like, in that when I'm working and running a business, you're looking at everything is quite specific and particular, and there's certain requirements and technical challenges and timescales and deadlines and pressure and so on. And there's a need to be accurate, there's a need to be precise. And I suppose the painting is the antidote to that, in that I don't plan anything. I have the paints, I mix colour, I put it on the board. And the painting that I donated for the auction was the most kind of realistic, I suppose, attempt.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of the work that I've done is completely abstract sort of landscape. And I'm not doing it for anyone. There's no pressure, there's no deadlines. It's just, I'm enjoying mixing paint and putting it on. And it's a nice contrast to day-to-day life. So
there is always advantages, even in the empty nest syndrome, as they say.
yeah, it gives you a bit more space and time to think about things that you like to do. And as mothers, as people running a business, you can put a lot of that aside for a lot of time, a long time, and it's just a nice thing to do now. And I think it's probably going to become something that features more in my life as I get older. And yeah, it's somewhere between a hobby and a passion, and could be my next time round at it again, painting, sort of.
Listen, no pressure, but when you're ready, showroom is open. Il Salotto is opening in March. So after that, whenever you feel like a solo exhibition, floor plan is yours, or floor space is yours.
Wow.
Come in and then have a beautiful evening with your friends, drinks, and then showcase your beautiful work anytime.
That sounds amazing. I would absolutely love that. So yeah, let's get a date in the diary for that.
Cool. You've got time. Any in the spring, anytime you want, we'll be ready for you.
Fantastic. That's an amazing offer. Yes, that would be great. I'd love that.
Yeah. Listen, thank you very much. First of all, for your patience and recording this again. I think second time was definitely better.
Good. Yeah, I think so.
Merry Christmas to everybody. As you can see, I've got my Santa hat on. So this is the last episode of this year. So we'll be back in the new year with much more beautiful talks. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you and talk to you next year. Merry Christmas. Thank you very much for listening Il Salotto Sessions. If you enjoyed the chat, please make sure you share with your friends, as well as follow our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcast. For more information on what we do, please visit ilsalotto.design and designpopup.com. You can also find us on Instagram _designpopup and Il Salotto Glasgow, as well as LinkedIn. Should you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions, please do get in touch at hello@ilsalotto.design. We would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.